This is Block 3, Progressives in Power, Section 3, Progressive Successes, the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire. Sometimes large moments in history turn on small things. Relatively small things. And this was the case with the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire in New York City. In 1911, there was a company called the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. And they had a factory, a small factory, a sweatshop, if you will, in a building in New York City, in which worked immigrant women and immigrant children. There were so many immigrant women and children there, and they were so desperately poor, that the owners of the company made sure that all the doors were locked and bolted to make sure that the women could not leave work, sneak out of work early, steal things out of work. There was one way into the factory floor and only one way, the same way, out of the factory floor. Well, in 1911, in this textile factory, a fire broke out. And if you can imagine the scenes inside the building, they must have been horrible. In a span of a half hour, 146 women lost their lives in this fire, many of them jumping to their deaths from the tall windows. If you look closely at the picture, there are no fire escapes. There was only one way out. The doors were locked, the windows were bolted, and these 146 women died an absolutely horrible, horrible death. This was the spark that changed the country. Before this, workplace safety was simply something that government did not do. Read your Constitution. There is nowhere in there that says government shall ensure a safe working environment for people. Well, after the Triangle Shirtwaist fire, that changed. And almost everybody, progressives to people with no real political opinions at all, only the most die-hard, laissez-faire people now said the government has to do something about this. We cannot have 146 women dying in a fire in the middle of New York City. It provided a perfect dramatization for poor working conditions. The fire spread so fast, obviously, because they're textiles and they're just, in the middle of floors, and these poor women and children had nowhere to go, nowhere to run, nothing to save them, and they burned to death in a terrible, terrible way. Shortly after the Triangle Shirtwaist fire, rules and laws were passed saying companies cannot lock doors. They have to have adequate exits. You have to have fire escapes. You have to have a way out. And those regulatory commissions were tasked with enforcing those laws. And inspectors would come to every factory in New York. Where are the fire escapes? How many people can they take out in a minute? How many doors are going into this factory? How many doors are going out? How do you do fire drills? All of those things that we now take for granted in terms of workplace safety were kicked into action by this horrible tragedy in New York City in 1911. It's one of those little things in history that just turns an entire country. And overnight, everybody was supporting increased safety regulations at work. It is one of the turning points in social history and in the role of the government changing during the progressive era. The Triangle Shirtwaist fire. Let me show you some more pictures. They're pictures worth looking at. Here you see, here's police officers with the bodies of some of the women who jumped. Eerily familiar. Can you see those? I hope you can see those. Zoom out, yeah. Eerily familiar to 9/11, of the jumpers on that day. See if there's any more. Let's see. Here is the inside of the building after the fire. You can just see how terrible and destructive it must have been. Here's more bodies laying on the street. Mostly of young women, Italian immigrants for the most part. and it changed America. I don't know if you can see that. There's people in caskets after the Shirtwaist fire. It changed America and changed the role. Here you can see, here's a cartoon of the era. You can see here's obviously a cartoonish image. A cartoonish image of a businessman, big fat guy with a double chin and the frock coat and the top hat, hanging out with death. Here's death, with a triangle of rent, profit, and interest, and laying dead in the middle of it, burning to death, is this immigrant woman laying down here. Images like this are powerful images, and they tell a clear story. And the story of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire was clear as day for most Americans.